Greetings nerds and virgins, welcome to the video. Today I'm going to be going through the biggest upsets in UFC history, but before we start, can you like and subscribe? I'm getting views, but I want some subscribers as well since I'm building a community here. So please subscribe to hop on the shadow train. Choo choo, hop on the shadow train. But yeah, first of all we got Serra vs GSP. So it all started in The Ultimate Fighter. The Ultimate Fighter season was called The Comeback, featuring 16 former UFC fighters all hoping to land a second shot in the promotion after having been cut in their previous stints. It was a mixed bag of fighters with experience that reached all the way back to UFC 16 in the case of Mikey Burnett, and all 16 of the competitors had something to prove after making it to the big show before being sent down to the minors. One of the cast members though was Serra, who had fought in the UFC a total of 8 times previously, amassing a record of 4 wins, 4 losses, with almost all his fights taking place in the lightweight division. It was UFC 53 in 2005 when Serra bumped up to welterweight for the first time, but lost to then rising star Karo Parisyan before exiting the promotion until later. That year, when the Ultimate Fighter Season 4 started production, the contestants on the show also had one extra incentive laid at the feet in addition to an enticement of earning their way back to the UFC octagon. The 2 winners of the show, one at welterweight and one at middleweight, would earn title shots against the champions in their respective divisions when the season came to a close. It was the first and only time that stipulation was added to the reality show's stakes, and it made for an even bigger prize once was all said and done. The show that featured a cast of characters with potentially more alpha male types than in any other version of The Ultimate Fighter before. In the house there was 16 fighters who all had UFC experience, and none of them wanted to give an inch in training or during fights. As the show wore on, however, many of the fighters started to turn to Serra for his advice and coaching. Having been a long time in jiu-jitsu instructor under famed coach Enzo Gracie, Serra's voice was not only the loudest and most recognizable, there's just something about that thick New York accent he carries, but he also was clearly the most knowledgeable one whom other fighters could turn to without thinking he was playing them for a fool, just hoping to make it to the finals himself. Turns out once the show was over, Serra not only served as the de facto coach, but he was the most successful fighter as well, and it was in the Ultimate Fighter 4 finale where he met his former housemate Chris Lytle with a chance to win the reality show crown as well as a UFC welterweight title shot. The fight between Serra and Lytle wasn't one that will be remembered for much, unfortunately. It was a ton of clinching against cage as each fighter tried to rally for position. But when it was over, the judges gave the nod to Serra by split decision. It wasn't the kind of performance Serra hoped to give, especially knowing that this one would then set the stage for a showdown with the UFC welterweight champion. 1 week after Serra's sluggish win over Lytle earned him the title shot, 25-year-old GSP captured the UFC welterweight title with a knockout over legendary champion Matt Hughes. St. Pierre was the UFC's new golden boy, a true hybrid fighter who marked the next generation of mixed martial artists competing in the octagon. St. Pierre looked unstoppable through his run of victories up to the moment when he slammed his shin bone into Hughes' face to knock out the former champion to the mat before battering with punches to win the fight and claim the UFC title for the first time. Despite the fact that it was GSP's first UFC title, he was still hailed as the next great champion that the promotion would build around for the next decade. He had racked up several wins over top contenders including former champion BJ Penn, Sean Shirk, and Frank Trick. His first title defense would then come against Serra almost exactly 6 months later, and St. Pierre was declared as a huge favorite before the night began. The Canadian was a whopping minus 1,100 favorite at one point before the fight with Serra took place. Most looked at the bout as a formality for the champion before he started his climb into the deepest part of the welterweight division. No one believed Serra could pull off the impossible and beat St. Pierre. Heading into the fight, Serra knew he was being considered an underdog, maybe the biggest underdog in MMA history. Serra explained the situation when speaking to MMA Weekly Radio in 2006. just a week out from the fight helps motivate me for sure. And the fact that I'm such a huge underdog, hey man, that's no sweat to me. If anything, that's worse for him. Every round that I'm in there with him, people are thinking I shouldn't be in there with him. Should have took me out 2 rounds ago or 1 round ago. The long odds didn't seem to rattle Serra, but he knew that there was no playing around with an athlete the caliber of St. Pierre. His strategy was simple: get in his face and never let up on the pressure until the fight was over. I'm just going to try to force him to make a mistake, Serra said later in the same interview. I'll be in his face, and the one thing I can tell you is I'll be game. When asked for a prediction of the fight, Serra didn't inflate his own ego by saying he'd knock St. Pierre out or submit him on the ground. It sounded confident enough that he'd stick around and make it a good fight. To give his final call for how the fight would go down, Serra called on some wise words by his coach and mentor Renzo Gracie to draw on for inspiration as he stepped into the biggest moment of his fighting career. I hate to quote Renzo on this, but I'm going to go forward and see what happens. That's my favorite line from Renzo. I trained hard, I know it's going to be a war, and that's what I've prepared for. I've been the hammer in some fights and I've been the nail. Every day after that fight I can look myself in the mirror whether I was victorious or not. I don't get swept. Up into the hype of things, I'm going to stay in the moment, going to go out there and try to fight my best. Hopefully we do alright. UFC 69 took place on April 7, 2007 at the Toyota Center in Houston, Texas, with over 15,000 fans in attendance. GSP stood tall in the octagon as the main event began when referee Big John McCarthy pulled him and Serra to the center. It appeared as if the two fighters should not be in the same weight class. Before the first round kicked off, UFC lead commentator Mike Goldberg said, "Will tonight be the defining moment of Matt Serra's career?" Little did he know he was about to become the greatest protagonizer in all of MMA. As the fight started, St. Pierre was a physical specimen who towered over the much shorter and stockier Serra. Former UFC heavyweight and light heavyweight champion Randy Couture, who was working the commentary booth that night, mentioned that Serra had to get on the inside of St. Pierre's reach or he was going to have a long night of punishment doled out to him as the fight wore on. GSP has 6 inches of reach. He's a very dynamic striker with his feet and his hands, Couture commented. He'll use that long jab and keep Matt out of bay all day and pick him apart. He's going to eat them all night if he doesn't get past that range. St. Pierre attacks were quick as he launched kick after kick, aiming at Serra's head, looking for his second knockout in a row after finishing Hughes with the same kind of strike. Serra wasn't going to be intimidated, however, and kept coming back with body shots anytime he could get inside on the Canadian, almost like he knew he could get the knockout at any time. St. Pierre toyed with Serra continuously, throwing kicks while bouncing up and down on his feet. With just over 2 minutes left to go in the first round, one punch changed everything. Serra connected a looping right on GSP just behind the ear, and as he wobbled backwards, struggling to catch his balance, it was clear that the shot landed better than most expected. Serra swarmed punches, and at one point St. Pierre fell flat onto his hands and knees, and the UFC color commentator Joe Rogan shouted, "He's hurt!" St. Pierre tried valiantly to get his legs back under him, but Serra was unrelenting with his attacks and again tagged the champion with a quick left-right combination that dropped him to his knees. With his head rattled and air running out, GSP tried to get a hold of one of Serra's legs but couldn't get any traction, and he tried to bounce on his feet. It was then that Serra connected one more big right hand that sent GSP crashing butt first to the mat. "He's hurt bad," Rogan screamed over and over again. Serra rained down shots from below. He finally got the stoppage and produced the biggest upset in UFC history. Some other upsets in the UFC though are Bisping vs Rockhold 2, where Bisping came in short notice and gave Luke Rockhold the left hook Larry. McGregor vs Diaz 1, where Diaz also came in short notice and got the job done. Sean Strickland vs Israel Adesanya, where everyone counted Strickland out, saying he was tailor-made for Izzy, yet Strickland put on one of the worst beatings I've ever seen. Leon Edwards vs Kamaru 2, where Leon threw a Hail Mary in the last round after getting dominated as the underdog. He silenced everyone. And also Dillashaw vs Renan Barão, when Dillashaw was up and coming. Everyone saw Barrow as an all-time great. Another upset is when Holly Holm shocked Australia, knocking out Ronda Rousey at Marvel Stadium. And finally, of course, Nunes vs Pena. But let me know any upsets I missed and which was your favorite upset of all time. Also, remember to like and subscribe to hop on the Shadow Train. Choo choo, hop on the Shadow Train. But yeah, I'll see you at the top.
Hey, you tried to break me, but you couldn't tear me apart. I've got a fire inside, gonna ignite and restart. I'm rising up higher than before. With every step I take, I'm closing in on the score.